2 years ago. I released a video called The Sopranos, analysing one of the greatest scenes, part 1, where I did a detailed breakdown of the scene where Johnny Sack demands Carmine Sr. sanctions a hit on Ralph Cifaretto. The Sopranos is an incredibly layered show, with fantastic characterization, where even a nod or a raise of an eyebrow can carry heavy weight. And this scene is no exception, being a great example of power struggle and leverage play. The idea behind this video was that it would be the first in a series I would do where I dissect different scenes in the show, analysing the interplays between characters, usually for scenes where two characters are squaring off against each other, of which there are many in the show. Tony versus Ralph after Jackie Jr. shoots up the card game is one I've wanted to do for a long time, a brilliant scene. Tony and Jr. on the couch, Christopher's intervention, etc, etc. The thing is, I just never got around to it. I mean, yeah, in a way I did. I've talked about Tony and Ralph's last scene. I've talked about when Tony visits Hesh, but these videos are usually broader, looking at character arcs and relationships. I want to start looking at specific scenes in more detail. Let me know what scenes you'd like me to analyse down in the comments section below. And before you do, please consider subscribing to the channel. Today, let's warm up by starting this series with a small one between Christopher and Tony in the episode Irregular Around The Margins. In this episode, Chris is away on work, and back at the club, Tony and Adriana bond over their recent health issues, with Adriana's involving actual dysentery in her ranks. Aid is told by the FBI to get closer to Tony for information, and whether this played a part or not, but the two are seemingly about to get funky before the Shah of Iran interrupts to give us a 360-degree headspin. Later, Tony and Aid drive to Dover to score coke, but it's pretty blatant that some shenanigans would have taken place between them. I need to get into specifics, but they crash in the car together, and of course the crew starts gossiping like high school girls in a chit-chat room. This leads Christopher to become irate when he returns, beating Aid and throwing her out of the apartment. Sickeningly, he throws food at Vito, which was wrong, and is almost killed by Tony for his tirade. Eventually, Tony asks Carmela, who is currently separated from him, to attend a public dinner with Christopher and Aid to show that all is well. This episode has some really great moments and provides a lot of insight into characters, like how far Aid is willing to go for the feds and how far Tony is willing to go for coups. Dover, apparently. There's a lot of gems, like this part where after Christopher has emptied his handgun into Tony's SUV and comes after him in the Bing, Paulie says,
"Way I see it, Tony, he must have known the gun was empty. Look what he pumped into your car."
What are you trying to say, Paulie? The fuck you trying to say, Paulie? Huh?
Christopher must be so drunk and angry out of his mind that he can't seem to realise that Paulie, so often his rival, is actually trying to save him by suggesting Chrissy wasn't actually trying to kill Tony and knew his gun was empty. Either that or Chris was aware of the implication but still took offence, as he took it that Paulie was suggesting he was a bitch and wasn't serious in his conviction to take out Tony, piling on the emasculation Chris has been receiving in this episode. Either way, Paulie has a sad expression on his face after this, like he pities Chris. Anyway, I need to learn to restrain myself. There's so much we can talk about with this show, but I'm here to talk about a specific scene. So in and amongst all this, before Chris has exploded and tried to pop the parade float, he is summoned by Tony. This is the first time Tony and Chris have met since Chris has come back. He has interrogated Adriana and is visibly furious. Tony will have to approach this situation carefully and assured. Christopher has flown off the handle before, Scarface style, and Mr. Taipei personality is nowhere near as calm, cool and collected as he looks in this scene, as shown by the very end of the scene, where the boss demeanour is dropped after Christopher walks out and Tony looks equally relieved that things didn't go worse and equally apprehensive that things might still spiral out of control, in spite of his impressively stoic performance in this scene. But that's what it is, a performance. Immediately after Christopher arrives and Tony asks how Aid is, Tony literally gives him a stick of shit to put in the bin, like he's the hired help. It's a power move from Tony, an assertive and dominant command to perform something humiliating, just to ensure the hierarchy is firmly established before the conversation begins, just to ensure Chris remembers that he's talking to the motherfucking one who calls the shots. Tony does a bit of small talk about people who don't clean up after their pets, which will gauge the level of Chris's anger. If Chris replies by saying, "Oh yeah, I can't stand it, I wish these dog walkers got fined," then clearly Tony will have overestimated Chris's anger and will have dropped the conversation. If Chris immediately explodes, then Tony knows this situation cannot be salvaged. The pet comment might also be a callback to the fact that Chris killed Adriana's dog, Tony trying to make him feel guilty. It's beyond degrading. You've shown up full of rage and ready to go a couple of rounds, and all of a sudden you're handed the shit end of a stick to disarm you. What exactly is Chris supposed to do here? He refuses. Tony will grandstand and feign anger, and all of a sudden he's probably going to start taking punches from the big man. And the narrative changes from Tony sent Chris away to be with my smelly Valentine to Tony has disrespected the boss. Maybe he could have shoved the bin in Tony's direction with his foot, but that would have been pedantic and obvious. The best thing he could have done was pick up the basket and hold it in front of Tony for him to throw the stick into. That would strike the perfect balance between defiance and obedience. The stick thing is also symbolic in the sense that no matter what happens, Tony is the boss, and Chris will have to eat whatever shit Tony gives him in this scene, whatever excuses he gives, which really was terrible. In all honesty, things might have been better if Tony and Aid admitted they were going to score coke. It's not the best look, but it's better than the obvious lie Tony and Aid agreed on. Anyway, Tony lays out his argument clearly.
It's blind luck, that accident. Cop told me he thought he was coming up on a fatality when he saw the car.
Then, without anyone needing to get into gory details, and without Chris bringing it up and then Tony having to respond to Chris's base argument, Tony gets it right out there in a calm and empathetic tone.
I'd be thinking the same thing if I were you. But it's not true.
Chris plays ignorant, giving a non-committal answer.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But to be honest, it's too blunt and childish. Obviously Chris is agitated and both know it. Say something. Dictate the flow of the conversation rather than allow Tony to take the reins. Tony's next comment is such a brazen and obvious lie that it probably was bait to get a reaction out of Chris to see just how far Chris will go.
Her car was in the shop. I was driving her home from work. That's all. We were looking to get a burger.
In Dover.
Now that Chris has made the implication, Tony immediately goes on the attack and begins his gaslighting, using the argumentative fallacy of appealing to emotion by insinuating Chris doesn't care that Adriana got hurt, hand-waving the actual criticism that Chris had, which is, why were they getting a burger in Dover of all places?
What difference does it make? You don't seem to give a shit. She almost died. She could have been paralyzed or scarred up. And you got to push on?
Chris doesn't fall for it and goes in heavier and more direct.
What were you doing out there alone in a car with my fiancée?
We were talking about you selfish prick, and how you were the best thing that ever happened to her.
A brilliant diversion by Tony here, back over the net with an attempt at a guilt trip by again appealing to emotion, and this time it works.
Oh, you don't think this fucking devastates me?
Now the goalposts of the conversation have changed. Now it's about Chris and his emotions and insecurities rather than Tony and his cock. All of a sudden, it's a therapy session. Chris has already lost.
Well, frankly, you scored so far over your head when you got her. What do you expect?
The fuck are you talking about?
She's a knockout, a 10. And look at you. You're average at best.
This is now beyond humiliation, as well as the fact that Tony is insulting the looks of a man who thinks he could be a male model. He's also praising the looks of the woman he's alleged to have slept with, or try to, instead of doing the obvious thing and saying, I'd never even look at her. Talk about a power move.
So you better reconcile yourself with that, or you're gonna be fucking paranoid your whole life.
This is fantastic manipulation from Tony. I'm in awe of him. Somehow he's taken a slam dunk guilty verdict and flipped it to make it out that Christopher is insecure that his wife is a looker and he thinks everyone's gawping at her.
Oh, so this is my fucking fault now?
Another lame comeback from Chris. Hello, Chrissy. Bring it back on topic that this guy was in a car with your fiancée at 2 a.m.
Nothing happened, and I'm not gonna say it again. You should have married that girl 2 years ago.
A bit of grandstanding here from Tony, more assertive, getting offended himself, and on top of that blaming Christopher again, saying the situation looks awkward because he hasn't married Aid and she's a free woman, so of course it looks awkward if the two of them are in the car together.
Everybody knows you've been the biggest fucking coos hound around the past 4 or 5 years. Your midlife crisis, you'd fuck a catcher's mitt.
Now this might be true, but it's an ad hominem attack against Tony's character which has no bearing on what happened with Aid. It's a crap argument to make because Tony can easily say, yeah, I am a coos hound, but I didn't sleep with Aid. End of subject. In any case, it seems to have an effect because Tony switches tactics, knowing he can't deny being a coos hound. You can see his brain working out the plan of attack, and he chooses to go to taboo lengths and swear on his children, knowing that Chris wouldn't dare lower himself by suggesting Tony would lie on his kids. And the genius thing is, technically, Tony is right, because there is nothing going on between him and Adriana when it comes to discourse and manipulation. And even if he could, what exactly can he do about it? But Tony's sigh at the end signifies that he wasn't as comfortable as he looked in this scene. He may have won this battle with Chris through masterful redirection, manipulation, gaslighting and guilt tripping, but the war isn't over. The scene also shows the extent of Tony's narcissism, because we know he would have gone all the way with Aid. He didn't stop himself, he didn't resist as he told Melfi, he was interrupted. And yet the frustration for him is paramount when no one believes that nothing happened. Like he said, he might as well have fucked her. Tony also somehow manages to divert the anger onto Chris and get angry at him in their scene together when it's him that's supposed to be under investigation. And later he accepts all the praise from Melfi for his self-control. It's like he actually convinced himself of the lies he's told everyone else, that he would never do the hanky-panky with Aid. Sure, Tony outmaneuvered Chris, but he should have handled this situation better than insulting Chris and increasing his paranoia. Maybe he should have gone down the "she's like a daughter to me" route. But this video is getting quite long, so maybe the conversation as to how Tony should have handled it might be saved for another day. So what do you think of this scene? Let me know in the comment section below, and be sure to let me know which scene you want me to take a look at next. And thanks for watching.